Welcome to the Manifest Supply Chain Platform. Manifest is a toolkit intended for researchers, journalists, students, and scholars who are interested in visualizing, analyzing, and documenting supply chains and trade networks. The goal of this video is to give you an introduction to Manifest, to talk about its interface, and give you an overview of some of its capabilities. When you first load Manifest, you'll be greeted by a screen like this one. It contains a number of different things. It contains a manifest for Manifest itself. It loads a random manifest, in this case, this Western Electric telephone supply chain from 1927. And it contains this introductory pop-up, which gives you a list of some sample manifests that you might be interested in exploring. And indeed, I'm going to go ahead and click right now on this listing of Amazon fulfillment centers from 2016. The manifest interface is divided into two components. On the left, there's a sidebar which contains a listing of all the active manifests. And indeed, we could look at each of these. We could go ahead and close one. We could open another one. In fact, I'm going to open that Amazon Fulfillment Center manifest again. It also contains a visualization view. The default visualization view is this geographic visualization, a map. The map contains a collection of nodes, and if there's the appropriate connection information between those nodes, lines that show travel between nodes on the map. So here we have, for example, a source of mica, which is traveling to the telephone assembly at Hawthorne outside of Chicago for Western Electric in 1927. These two different views are interlinked. So if I click on a node on the map, say this Prime Now hub, Dell 2, it will scroll the sidebar to the appropriate entry for that node. The same is true in reverse. So if I want to look at where iron was coming from for the Western Electric telephone, and I click on that point on the sidebar, it will open for me this view of the iron sources on the map in Minnesota. The map interface is relatively simple, but I just want to highlight a few different features. So we have a very simple, very basic full screen view here, which is interesting only insofar as one of the primary use cases we see for Manifest is to produce images that people can download representing supply chains or collections of supply chains. So for example, if you look at this camera icon on the upper right, if we click this, it will actually produce a static image that will save to my local computer of the map as it exists right now. So whatever supply chains we've opened, whatever transformations we've done to them, whatever framing we've set for the map, whatever tile set we're using for the map, or additional layers we might load, all of that will be represented in the image as you see it. So we think this will be quite useful for people who want to document and then visualize a supply chain, and then use that visualization on their website, in reports, in presentations. If I go ahead and click on this layer icon on the bottom right of the map, I can see that if I want to, I can change the base layer for the map. So for example, if I want to create an image using this nice, simple toner tile set that Stamen provides, I can switch to that and download that image. I can load some additional data layers. We initially load a shipping lane data layer, which shows you major shipping lanes, but we could load a data layer of all marine traffic, and here you can see all the ships that are going around and indeed through the oceans and waterways of the United States, North America. We can load the rail connections, and we can see the major railways in the United States, in North America here. But I'm going to go ahead and turn those off, and I'm going to switch back to the base view for a second. If I click this icon, it will sort of reset my view. One of the primary goals for Manifest is for it to be flexible, for it to allow you to move back and forth between supply chains quite easily. So every action is relatively light. If I don't want to look at this supply chain anymore, I just close it. If I don't want to look at this supply chain anymore, I just close it. If I want to open a new supply chain, I can load a file from my local computer, or I could load one of the samples from this listing here. So let me just load those back. we have a very basic capability to do some filtering. So if I type into this filter box here, say a particular kind of material in the Western Electric supply chain I'm interested in, say flax, it will show me all of the sources of flax, dimming all of the nodes that don't contain flax. And so if we scroll down here, we'll see it contains entries for linen, which is what this flax is being used to produce, and the raw flax sources themselves as they existed for Western Electric in 1927. Flax is used in the telephone to produce linen paper, which is actually a material that's used to wrap telephone cabling and provide different kinds of insulation in the production of the telephone as it existed in 1927. We can also use this to see how we have a kind of categorization feature. So if we go to our Amazon Fulfillment Center supply chain, we'll see that some of the entries are categorized, and those categories appear here as hashtags. So we see hashtag fresh delivery. What that actually is just an opportunity to filter here. So if I click that, it will dim all the things which are not fresh delivery, allowing me to see all the fresh delivery fulfillment centers that Amazon has. So if you have a data set that has been well categorized, you can actually use this to very quickly jump back and forth between different subsets of the supply chain that you're interested in looking at. One other view that could be quite useful is the ability to set your base layer to something like a satellite view. So if we set something like this to a satellite view, we can go ahead and click on this icon, this little tag, and that actually does a kind of quick zoom in. So it'll take us very quickly to an Amazon facility at a high level of zoom so that we can get a sense of what's going on there. If, for example, I scroll up here, I happen to know that we have some very clear warehousiness, I guess, associated with facility number 9. I'll just go ahead and click on it. It'll jump me right over there, and I can see, aha, yes, this is a giant warehouse, a giant fulfillment center that Amazon has in Phoenix, Arizona. Of course, if I want to jump back, I can click that zoom reset. It will jump me back here, but I can open another different Amazon fulfillment center, and I can again quickly jump, see instantly, aha, this is another, this looks like a very kind of desolate logistics site in a lot of ways. It gives me a good sense of what's going on at the actual geography. Now, this depends, of course, on having a data set where those latitude and longitude coordinates have been set to the sort of most meaningful, specific point. Here they are indeed tied to the exact Amazon facility. If this was a more sort of general connection listing, then it might not be as meaningful to jump, this deep into the zoom. I'm going to go ahead and set that back to our default tile set here. All right. One other capability that the map has is the ability to scale its data. So if we click up here, you'll see that there's the ability to scale by impact, by people, and size. And this is actually dynamically generated based on the quantitative variables that appear in the manifest that we've loaded. So, for example, the Amazon Fulfillment Center manifest has, as you see here, people, 300 count, size, and then we have a square footage listed. It has quantitative data. In fact, the square footage is fairly complete. We have square footage for almost all of these Amazon Fulfillment Centers. The people, which is the employees, that were reported. For many of them, we don't actually have that number represented in the data set. But this is dynamic, so if we were not looking at this map and we go to scale, we'll see that we can't scale by people and size. We can't scale by square footage. If we open back up that Amazon Fulfillment Center, then we'll see, aha, indeed, now we can scale by people and size. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. I'm actually going to get rid of the default manifest supply chain for a second. And I'm going to scale by people. So now we get a sense of, let me get rid of the Western Electric telephone map too, so we can really get just the Amazon facilities. So this shows you where people are working for Amazon in these fulfillment centers. Again, the coverage is not complete, but it's quite useful just as a sort of rough visualization. The same is true of size. Obviously here we have a fairly complete data set. We have the real square footage for these facilities. We can get very quickly a sense of the relative scale, the proportional scale of these facilities. We can do so not just for North America, of course, but worldwide. We can produce, again, by clicking on that camera icon, images that represented this information if we wanted to. We could switch to our simple toner view. We could click this icon and all of a sudden we have a visualization of Amazon fulfillment centers in Europe scaled by the square footage of those facilities, again using this 2016 data set. So let me switch back to our default tile set. Let me zoom out here. I'm going to reload our Western Electric telephone map for a second. There we go. So that sort of covers most of the geographic functionality, most of the functionality for the map. But we have a number of other visualizations here. One that is maybe simple to talk about is that we always have the capability to look at the raw data, to get the manifest JSON file, which is what all of these things are. They're all built from this little manifest file format, which is a JSON file. You can always jump to this raw view, download that JSON file for any of the samples that we've provided, and indeed re-download it for your own file if you're working on one of your own files. You can also download a kind of simple text markdown view if you just need a simple sort of text presentation of a manifest of a supply chain. But perhaps more interesting than that are these other views. Now I should say here that these are really just kind of proof of concept sample visualizations really. The system is extensible. As I said, we could change the data layers that we use. We provide a few different data layers in terms of the geographic visualization. We could change the tile sets that we're using, but we can also have different visualizations plugged in here. We've built a couple sort of basic visualizations, a graph view, a flow view, and a chord view that are primarily focused on visualizing connection. So they visualize connection between networks, between supply chains here. And indeed, when I click on this graph visualization, it's going to show me both of our supply chains, except it won't actually show me the Amazon supply chain. And the reason it won't show me the Amazon supply chain is because the Amazon supply chain doesn't have any connection information. Right? We just have represented here a listing of Amazon fulfillment centers. We don't have, the links that show movement between those fulfillment centers or to retailers, to consumers, or from suppliers. It's just the sort of points. Now for the Western Electric map, we do indeed, as you see, have all these lines showing connection, showing how, flax, for example, is moving from sites in Europe to be produced into linen, to be produced into paper in the United States. So when we click on this graph, it will tell me, oh, I couldn't visualize that Amazon fulfillment center as a graph, but indeed I could visualize the Western Electric map. We have a little zoom slider here to kind of allow you to manipulate this a little bit to make things clearer for yourself. Just like the geographic visualization, this is connected with the sidebar, and indeed it's connected with the geographic visualization. So if we do things like filter, we can filter again by flax, and we'll see all of our flax entries. And the sidebar has dynamically updated to show only those entries. If we click on one of these, if I click on that, well, let me clear the search. If I click on that, it will jump the sidebar to that particular point. And indeed, if I happen to switch back to the map visualization, it will take me to that point that I just highlighted. Let me switch back to the graph here. We can visualize this in other ways as well. We can look at this as a flow diagram, which allows me to see tiers of connection quite easily. It's the primary use for this visualization. We can also look at this as a kind of chord diagram, which is a way that's going to allow me to better represent kind of quantitative variables if we choose to look at quantitative variables. And indeed, let me jump over here to a map that has just loaded just our sample manifest, and I'm going to go ahead and jump to the chord diagram here. Let me zoom it a little bit. So right now it's not scaled in any way, right? This is the sort of default kind of, quantitative by number of nodes connected. But we can scale. We can set it to impact. This affects other views too. Our graph, so if we had a data set that contained, carbon information in terms of, the carbon dioxide equivalent value, CO2 equivalent value, we could scale it by that. If we had weight, if we had cost, if we had, that Amazon map, but we had meaningful connective information, we can scale and then switch back and forth between those scales. This affects, all of these views, the flow view, the chord view, and the graph view. And again, these are all linked, right? So I click on something here, it links me to the appropriate place in the sidebar. It links me to, if I click on AbelloHost here, which is our hosting provider for Manifest, I click back on the map. It has immediately taken me there. I'm still scaling by impact. All of these connections are still there and present. So this is a sort of rough overview of the Manifest interface, some of its features, some of its tools. We have a number of other things on the Manifest site. You can learn more about Manifest, but maybe more importantly, you can check out some of the data sets. I'm just going to click over. If you're interested in the Manifest file format, this is a format that's still in development. As I suggested, it's a kind of basic JSON file format. It's very simple. We do provide an editor, and I'm going to show you the editor in just a moment, but you can see some example deployments that we've done. You can see some legacy source map data, which was created for the source map project at MIT through the MIT Center for Civic Media. And this data can be loaded into manifests. It's also been used to build out some of the sample manifests, although they've been expanded in some detail. But really, the goal here is to build new material. Manifest is not a database. So even though we do provide these sample data sets, and we're happy to add to this if you produce some supply chain data, you produce some manifest files, and you want to share them with people, we're happy to partner with you, to collaborate with you, to share that data. But at this time, we don't provide a database per se. Really, the goal is that you produce files, manifest JSON files, that you then use this web software to work with, to visualize, to produce images from, etc. Now you can make those JSON files however you like. You can make them in a text editor. You can set up certain kinds of software to export them automatically, different kinds of logistics or network related software. We also provide a very basic JSON editor here. So I'll just demonstrate it for you. If we wanted to come here to go to the supply chain editor, we would be greeted with this, which allows us to describe a manifest supply chain, to add a variety of nodes that constitute our points in the map and develop connections between them. I'm just going to go ahead and load that sort of sample manifest of manifest to populate this. And you'll see here that this is manifest. This is the digital and physical supply chain for manifest itself. Indeed, if we scroll down here, we'll see this is that intro node that pops up, that intro pop-up when we first load manifest. Manifest supports Markdown as a text annotation in a variety of different fields. We can manipulate these nodes. We could delete this node if we wanted to. We could modify this node in some way. Each of these nodes has a number of different tabs. We can set attributes, so we can set the connections. We can say this node is connected to this other node. We can categorize it with multiple categories. We can add multiple images. We can provide sourcing information. We can add different kinds of quantitative variables, multiple quantitative variables, if we like, and then we can, of course, scale those and visualize those as we want. Manifest doesn't provide geocoding. Instead, it provides a very simple interface here to allow you to select a point. So this is a location here that if if this was the wrong location, let's say, well, this was actually in Reykjavik. I can zoom in on the map to the appropriate location, and I can say actually this is this latitude and longitude in Reykjavik. So I don't have to get an API key for Google to do geocoding or pay for geocoding, etc. I can just sort of, select as a researcher building out this supply chain. I happen to know this is the street address, or this is the city, or this is the country. I can select latitude and longitude to build up this point. Of course, if you were generating this manifest JSON file in some other way, then it might have come with some geocoding information already. But once I produce this or edit an existing manifest, I can just go ahead and click, save and download. Zoom, that file has downloaded to my local computer. And indeed, I can then, go back to, a manifest instance, and I can, not just load one of the sample manifests that we provide, but I can load my own custom manifest. If I have this on a server and the server was set up to support, cross-site linking, I could load it from its URL, but I can also just load it from a file. So if I click, upload manifest file, and I choose that JSON file that I just produced, then indeed it has appeared here. There's that sample manifest. It's back. It's loaded. If I made some edit to it, that edit would be present here on the page. This is sort of the workflow that we imagine. We imagine that people produce, documentation of networks that they're interested in working with. They work with them locally. Of course, again, we're happy to host those files if you'd like to send them to us, just to share with people. But this is primarily intended as a platform that you bring your own data to as a way of, from a research perspective, understanding a supply chain, from a journalistic perspective, visualizing and telling stories about supply chains. So I hope this was a good overview of the manifest platform. We're interested in hearing feedback from people about what features might be desirable going forward. Manifest supports a lot of features that the interface doesn't necessarily expose in every way. But we're happy to take your feedback and your use cases, and we look forward to seeing what kinds of supply chain stories people tell with this tool.